Okay, I think that we can start now. Other people join us. Hello everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Sergey. I'm co-founder and CEO of International Impact Investing Center Galileo, and I'm absolutely happy to facilitate this webinar. Thank you for coming. Well, I will tell about organizations in the end of our event. And now I want to introduce you our speaker, Timotheos Mavropoulos, or just Tim. He's a corporate finance manager at Alta Capital. He did his PhD in finance studies at the Swedish House of Finance, Stockholm School of Economics. And he's a great specialist in the financing models of social enterprises in the European Union. Tim, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sergey, for this introduction. I would like to welcome everyone for this webinar. I will, guys, start sharing my screen like in 20 seconds. But first of all, I would like to thank Sergey and Svetlana for this wonderful introduction and for this opportunity to share with you guys some thoughts on behavioral insights of social startups. And I'm very eager to have your feedback and share with you some of the thoughts and ideas that I have been investigating on, pondering on, thinking about. And here we go. So I will start my presentation now, and I guess we can just roll forward. In case you have any questions, you are able to ask them after the session. Thank you.
Yeah. So I really hope that this webinar will be very interesting, and I'm intrigued in behavioral science. I know that it's a mix of insights from psychology, economics, and neuroscience, and Tim will tell everything about this. And yeah, I suggest our participants to use chat, and if you have questions, you just can write it. And after Tim's speech, which will take, I guess, 40-50 minutes or something like that, yeah, you will have an opportunity to he will have an opportunity to answer your questions. And yes, and of course we will, after this webinar, but I guess it will happen already tomorrow, we will send you the presentation and video record of this webinar, so you will receive everything, and now you can concentrate on the content. Yeah, and I will turn off right now all microphones and video cameras, also that you can concentrate on what Tim's saying. So here we go. I give you the word, Tim.
Thank you so much, Sergey, again. Well, again, welcome everyone to this webinar. We're going to talk about behavioral insights for social startups. Let's get to know each other a bit better. I did my PhD in finance studies at the Stockholm School of Economics. I'm an empirical finance researcher with broad research interests, including social finance. And currently, I'm an advisor and manager at a boutique financial advisory firm, Alta Capital. Right now, I guess what we can concentrate on is the so-called intended learning outcomes. So what we will learn today is about a clear, we will get a clear understanding of the nature of some behavioral biases, such as overconfidence. We will understand how behavioral biases and emotions can be used to hedge, to protect basically our financial decisions if we are social entrepreneurs or we are leading social startups. And also I will mention 3 ingredients to improve our decision making and gain competitive advantage as a social startup. So for starters, what is behavioral science and what is behavioral finance in particular? Basically, it's an intersection between financial economics, cognitive psychology, and social psychology. So any kind of research or endeavor in behavioral finance basically concerns the intersection of these 3 fields. And what is a typical behavioral entrepreneur? Well, a typical behavioral entrepreneur is someone who has different risk preferences with respect to gain or loss based on certain reference point. Well, he or she is concerned about more than risk and return of an investment. That means that he or she is emotional. And this behavioral entrepreneur typically forms biased expectations based on very limited information. So this is typical definition of a behavioral entrepreneur. And I guess all of us, we can recognize ourselves in this definition. Now, what are behavioral biases? It's basically a systematic pattern of deviation from the norm or rationality in the decision-making process. This deviation results in certain suboptimal decisions, according to the traditional finance theory. And the sources of these biases include mental shortcuts to process information. That means that we use so-called heuristics to basically proceed to certain outcomes in our decision-making process. Source of biases also are limited capacity to process information due to either limited time or limited process resources, or emotional motivation that might have. We might have emotions involved in our decision-making process, and this can lead us to certain biases with respect to our decision-making in business or as investors. We can, of course, investigate a broad roadmap of all these biases. They have been broadly researched for several decades, and typical types and definitions are provided here. I will concentrate your attention on the overconfidence bias, which is a type of a cognitive bias, and we will explore further of how it affects our decision-making, also in the context of a social enterprise or a social startup. Before that, I would like to address those type of biases that are characterized as emotional biases, and you see how they are interconnected with cognition. So emotional biases are basically systematic errors in decision-making process that arise from feeling, affect, mood, or certain emotional states. So outside factors, affecting our emotions, affecting our decision-making process. And you see that there is certain cognitive aspect of emotion, and they are in constant mutual influence. So our emotion, our cognition, and our behavior are mutually so interrelated, okay? More precisely on overconfidence bias. Well, people usually tend to overestimate their knowledge, their ability, and the precision of the information they hold, or to be overly sanguine, meaning overly optimistic about the future or their ability to control it. And one of the most widely committed cognitive biases is precisely this overconfidence bias. From finance research, we know that overconfident people trade more frequently, face higher volatility, incur higher transaction costs, and earn lower returns. And of course, we can always consider certain research outcomes that, for example, for respect to merger decisions, do CEOs and CEO confidence help to explain those merger decisions? Well, yes. Overconfident CEOs usually overestimate their ability to generate returns. And as a result, they overpay for target companies and undertake value-destroying mergers. And the effects, of course, are strongest if they have access to internal financing. And those who are familiar with financial economics theory know the so-called winner's curse, where when bidder gives basically higher acquisition price in takeovers and obtains a small or even negative return. All these insights are coming from financial economics research and behavioral finance research. And of course, overconfidence bias may take different forms, and we will start connecting it to the social startups and to those people who lead those startups. And of course, there are different forms of overconfidence, such as miscalibration, where people tend to overestimate the precision of their knowledge. Better than average effect, where people tend to rate themselves as above average in some personal attributes, such as driving skills, athletic skills, business skills, or management skills. The illusion of control, where people tend to think that they have more control over events than objectively can be true. And of course, excessive optimism bias, where people assign probabilities to their own favorable outcomes, but just too high given historical experience or recent analysis. Now, I would like to illustrate the point of behavioral insight with a certain case. So suppose you're a small European family firm. You're a social startup selling handmade, environmentally friendly football souvenirs connected to your national football team. Suppose that your family is emotionally involved with this sport, and the company, and that you have strong family ties, emotional family ties, and as well as strong emotional ties with the local community. Well, you know that after the win of the opponent football team, you can expect a fall in your revenue, because your well-designed souvenirs will not be selling as much as before, resulting in weaker growth. So your growth, the growth of your social startup, is affected by some external emotional negative event. Well, again, imagine a situation where you're producing these souvenirs, and what you basically do is you sell those souvenirs to the fans of your national football team. And suppose the opponent football team, take any example, take Germany against Poland or Italy against Brazil. So opponent football team plays against your team, and you know that your social enterprise, your social startup depends on the outcome of certain external event to which you're basically connected emotionally. Now, what can we really think about this? How can we really perceive the case when we know that our emotions are involved in our business endeavor? I would like to talk about emotional hedging. Extracting emotional dividend from certain external event. To illustrate further, I will say that there are many cases in which you were not emotionally involved with your business, but you would not have been there in the first place. So, of course, your business is driven by your emotions. You love football, you love your local community, you love your national football team. You are doing business of selling your souvenirs based on the success of your national football team, right? So in this case, you actually possess a certain emotional capital that you can use to ensure or hedge your growth prospects. Now, how can we do that? So if in case of a negative external event, your emotions are certain to be heard, can we really capitalize on this negative emotion? Can we use it? Can we utilize it in our social startups firm growth? I would say that we can do that, and we can be, active thinkers about how we can do that. And one of the instruments that we can use is so-called emotional hedging. And the mechanism of it is that we financially bet, quotation marks, on the emotional negative outcome. So what we do is that, okay, if we are, say, an Italian family firm, and we know that the Italian national team plays against Brazil, the question is, on whom do we really bet our, capital on, so that to ensure our business growth? Well, if you think about it for a moment, usually when I ask my students in the classroom about that, they would say, well, I would bet on the team that delivers, the most probable result, i.e., for example, if Brazil is stronger than Italy, they will bet on Brazil. But if we think actively about it, if we consider this emotional hedging argument, what we should say is that irrespective of the objective probabilities or any probabilities of winning or losing, we should always bet on the opponent's team or on the tie. That means if I'm an Italian family firm, if I'm an Italian social startup, this means that I will, I would like to bet on the win of the Brazilian team or a tie to secure that my firm is growing. Remember that if the Brazilian team wins Italy, well, probably, I will not sell so much souvenirs. Then, what I can think about is that, okay, if I bet on Brazil or a tie, that means that, sure, my money, if Italy wins, will be gone, but of course, I will have more revenue from my souvenir business. Now, if Brazilian team wins or there is a tie, I will be emotionally hedged. That means I will receive certain financial returns from betting on a negative, emotionally negative outcome. Well, again, treat it as an insurance that you pay to protect yourself or your social startup business against a negative outcome. Again, so in case of a negative emotional outcome realization, you just collect your financial profit. So the above action hedges you, neutralizes you, basically the growth of your social startup in the negative scenario. So bottom line, if you have strong emotions, well, they can help you by providing a necessary emotional collateral to ensure your social startup's business growth in bad times. And why emotions? Again, even if you are not involved in the business-related activity, but still you expose yourself to joys and sorrows, my claim is that you capitalize on your sorrow to protect or hedge your joy. And this emotional dividend is paid in times of trouble, in the negative outcome. So learn to pay for your joyful growth by betting on your sorrows. And this thought, I guess, is one of those things that I would like you to carry with you forward from this webinar. Remember, again, in this example that we have been analyzing right now, we have an Italian family firm, social startup, and our income, right, our revenue depends on the revenue that we generate by the customers paying to us, or our clients paying for our souvenirs. Well, if our national team loses, I will sell less souvenirs. So on what outcome should I bet my money on? Say, bet again in quotation marks. Well, the opposite, the opponent football team, right? Or a tie. That means that I will secure my social startup's growth by betting on a negative emotional outcome. Again, going forward for these ingredients of securing successful financing, or going forward with a social startup and utilizing those behavioral insights, I would claim that we should know ourselves and know our market. In the previous example, the domain of entertainment, to where sports industry belongs, right, is different from, say, the domain of education, where many social entrepreneurs actively operate. And I can tell you from experience that there is more public funding opportunities available for such domains. Again, there is a role of perception management here, something that we will analyze further in our coming seminar in September, if you would like to sign up for that. So from my experience, large companies, private companies, tend to avoid using public funding for image considerations. They consider themselves being capable to address capital markets or private funding directly. They don't want to apply for, say, European funding projects, because they say, we're a commercial business, we would like to address private investors ourselves, and we would like to secure our funding from private sources. And this brings me to what you can do right now, certain insights that you can investigate by yourself. So public institutions, such as European Commission, are very sensitive to social problems. So grants and public funding for social startups are there to be utilized to address social problems, to address those social challenges, and to advance local communities or society in general. So I would like to a bit provoke you and do your search on the link that provided here on this slide, and search for social education and sport in Cordis database for publicly financed projects. I'm referring to the projects financed by the European Union Commission. And if you do this search, you will find out that basically social education is financed 6 times more than sport projects. And the amount of funding devoted to social causes, or to combat social problems, to address social challenges, is very much to the use of prospective social entrepreneurs and social startups. This brings us forward to the second ingredient of how to advance in your decision-making process and to finance your social startup, and to use behavioral insights for that. Basically, to familiarize yourself with the investor's language. Whenever you are compiling your pitch, the document that addresses investors, you need to deliver a clear message, meaning, okay, how investors' money will positively affect social startup project revenues. For example, as you see on the right-hand part of this slide, the revenues that we generate after we secured funding is obviously much better, and this is illustrated, with clear figures and clear numbers. You might also engage in information memorandums, including, say, value journey of I call it social project company example. We will address it on our next slide, and also provide some detailed financial projections, including, say, Excel files or Excel calculations. We will also provide this example afterwards. So take a look at this part of the real information memorandum. So this project was one of those projects that happened to be known by me, and obviously the numbers and the names are changed, but take a look at how it looks like. So social investments, new portfolio, and existing businesses are clearly illustrated in a presentation to investors, where they basically are familiarizing themselves with what this social entrepreneur, what this social enterprise is up to. Okay, so you are projecting your, say, revenue, because you will attract certain investments, and you have certain pro forma future projections about your performance. Take a look at how it looks like. This is the language that investors use. So since you know the language, you basically can adjust your presentation to exactly communicate your messages with investors. You know that they are very comfortable with clear language, numbers, projections, graphs, and so on and so forth. So take a look at those and speak the language that investors speak to secure the growth of your social startup. I will also illustrate it with the value journey. So say that we have a social project that would like to concentrate on sustainable packaging, and they would like to divest other activities. Well, if you would like this project to be financed, you would need to illustrate it and to provide to your prospective investors a clear value journey when you are saying that, okay, I will divest, or I will have the opportunity for bidding auction, or I will have maybe a stock exchange listing. You need to be crystal clear on the timing of those actions and on the particular access points for investors, whether or not there is a window for financing your social project. And I would also like to illustrate it with so-called waterfall chart. So if you have a social enterprise or a social startup, you would also like to gain investor attention by illustrating particular points where you're saying that your value, the value of your firm, the value of your project is increasing with certain steps. So be pedagogical, be illustrative in terms of, okay, what will be gained with each and every step. Okay, and then having secured this, you can always provide certain more technical details, and you can use certain financial projections, and you can use Microsoft Excel for that. So as you see, I will not go too much into detail, but as you see, suppose that you have a social project, you're a social startup, and you have an entrepreneurial project in the field of education. Well, illustrate clearly to the investors what will be the number of, say, educator teams that you will employ, what will be the social benefit that you will deliver, what will be the cost of it, how much would you save for the society to do so, and be very detailed, be illustrative, and speak the language that investors use. So such terms as net present value or discounted cash flows should be something that is in your vocabulary and you know how to explain, use, and utilize. What I will do next is to basically proceed to the ingredient 3. So be strategically opportunistic and contrarian. Again, large companies actually group think about sustainability. They would like to say that they're sustainable, they would like to provide evidence for that, but basically, they never apply for grants or awards. You will never find a certain corporation actually applying for a big corporation, applying for a grant or an award to finance its social activity. They will use either investors' money or their own internal financing to do that. So do your own research. Social entrepreneurship really signals sustainability and can actually be impactful. And again, prepare, know yourself as a social entrepreneur, know your market and your place in it, know your stakeholders and how they might perceive you. And now, to add some anecdotal part to it, a typical contrarian is by definition first and foremost an active thinker, going against group things. So as a social entrepreneur, you should always ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? Am I just going to the cliff and jump together with the crowd? Maybe it's good to just re-examine your view and apply certain techniques, certain behavioral insights to just proceed in an opposite way maybe. And again, I would like to illustrate it with a very particular example. So we all know about the brand that is illustrated on this slide. Again, this brand communicates success. And the brand is, in this case, Rolex. And we can always, we know that basically a gold Rolex watch has become an internationally recognized symbol of personal success. And that, no other luxury watch manufacturer has as much widespread recognition as Rolex. However, what I would like you to think about and to really ponder upon is, okay, if we are to believe that socially responsible firms are those who are absolutely and fully compliant with so-called environmental, social, and governance commitments, and they are compliant with the so-called ESG, again, environmental, social, and governance practices. Do we really think that they are socially impactful? Think about the following. You have an entrepreneur in a certain developing country, and this entrepreneur, he or she, is creating a certain light bulb to facilitate the access to electricity to their own, rural community. If we think about this example and we think about the fact that this entrepreneur is very innovative and he or she creates a very socially impactful product, we know that this impactful product, this light bulb, will actually secure electricity for the rural population. We know that it's socially impactful, but think about this. Think about the fact that he or she might be held by their children in doing so. And we know that child labor is illegal, meaning that we are not really fully compliant with ESG practices. If you would think now about a reputable car manufacturer, well, they can be totally ESG compliant, so they can have best corporate social responsibility practices and can have excellent reputation. And that's the same applies to reputable watch manufacturers that we examined before, because brand value is outstanding. However, are these companies, or are the company's products, main business activities, socially impactful? If we think actively about that, can you tell me how many people from the underprivileged communities or from developing countries can actually buy those luxury products? And the answer is, of course, not so many. Well, and this is the question about, the social impact. How much of a social impact does a reputable car manufacturer or luxurious watch manufacturer generates? Again, I'm not talking about ESG compliance. They are totally ESG compliant firms. But if you're a social startup or a social entrepreneur, you might think in a bit of a different way. So Rolex has introduced so-called Rolex Awards for impactful social entrepreneurs. And this example that I would like to illustrate here is Miranda 1. So Miranda plans to develop a fully commercial processing plant to recycle thousands of tons of plastic waste, to eliminate tens of thousands of tons of carbon emissions, producing useful products from substances that society would otherwise throw away to the detriment of the planet. And she has been awarded 200,000 Swiss francs. What I think Miranda has thought is that she can be really impactful by using Rolex Awards. And this impact that she will generate will, of course, be an example of a brilliant social startup. So I would like to leave you with this example to ponder upon and to give you certain insights about how behavioral science and behavioral insights can be used to the advantage of your social startup growth. Miranda has not been, innovative in creating a large corporation. She has been innovative in grasping the idea that she can utilize the reputable firm's award to actually finance her project, socially impactful project. And we will investigate more of this in our future session in September. So some of the topics that we will address in this session will be perception management and social value entrepreneurship. The role of perception and valuation and growth, the role of how you can control what emotional association your social startup or social enterprise evokes when you do it, and how you are perceived by certain important stakeholders. We will also talk about the art of social impact, something that I just addressed several minutes ago. So the art and science of proving your impact. Or how can you use convincing rhetoric, and how can you use actually econometric techniques to prove your impact and to move forward with your social enterprise or social startup idea. We will also address social value investing, a concept developed and investigated and researched by Hubert Buffett, basically blending capital for social good. We will speak about identification and utilization of different capital pools that diversify risk and unlock co-investment opportunities for social startups. Finally, we will speak about how do you prove your impact, basically how you measure your impact and how you assess your impact. This is a very tedious task. And we will talk about historical perspective on that, status quo as of today, and certain challenges, including data challenges, of how to prove your social impact and address broader investor base to be able to secure financing for your social enterprise. We will also take a look at developing certain industry standards and the difficult path to convergence that we are facing today regarding social impact or impact investing practices. And of course, we will examine the benefits of a forward-looking approach to impact assessments. We will illustrate it with certain important examples and case studies. And hereby, I would like to end and basically revert to Sergey, and maybe also hear certain questions that from the audience, from the people who are listening to us right now regarding whatever has been mentioned in my webinar before. Thank you so much.
Tim, thank you. It was really very, very interesting. And before we will go to questions from our participants, I just also want to tell some words about our activity, about Galileo. Tim, please, can you turn on presentation slide? Yeah, written. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is our website. If you don't know it still yet, you can visit it. And well, Galileo, what we are doing, our mission is to create a global community of people who are interested in making the world a better place. We provide accessible education for social startups and financial institutions and individuals who are interested to invest in social enterprises, which Tim told us. And yeah, the next slide. Tim, can you? Yeah, thank you. If you want to join us, you can become our member of our association. We have 4 different packages from individual to corporate. And as you can see here, the main benefits, of course, first of all, it's education. You will be able to attend our online events, and we really hope that in the autumn we can start to make offline events with real live people. We are waiting for this, and you will get access to our library, and your membership fee will provide support for our YouTube channel and development of our digital platform Chamomile, online platform for social startups, experts, and impact investors. We plan to launch it well in the end of August, in the beginning of September. So it will happen really very soon. And Tim, please, next slide. Can you? Yeah, only for you guys, we would like to offer a 30% discount if you apply till the end of this week. Yes, we will provide you with all these links, so just make your decisions. Yeah, and well, yeah, the next slide. Another thing is that you can subscribe on our Impact Digest. It's absolutely for free. Yes, so and every week you will receive selections of 5 most promising impact startups, vacancies, events in field of impact investing and reading. And yeah, the last slide. I also want to invite you to our next webinar with James Ellman. Mr. Ellman holds a bachelor degree in history and economics from Tufts and an MBA from Harvard University. He will talk about the costs of global warming and how it will impact on equity market performance over the next 2 decades. The webinar will take place on September 8th. It's absolutely free. I will also send you the link in order to register it. Okay, now we can come to questions from your side. And yeah, there is a question from Gabriela. Could you give us a brief intro how to value the social enterprise? Do you have any additional recommendations on how non-profit organizations can address donors? And perhaps a couple of key metrics that are a must when presenting the project.
Well, I guess I'll start maybe with the key performance indicators, the key metrics that you might present. The key metrics that you will choose to present always need to be relevant, right? Investors are obviously not stupid people, right? They know about your enterprise. They have probably done some initial due diligence on you and your project. So they basically know what industry indicators they will apply. And remember that, again, social enterprise and any social startup is an enterprise, is a company, right? So every business logic applying to the traditional so-called enterprise will apply this in the same way to the social enterprise or the social startup. So obviously, you need to concentrate on the metrics, on say profitability metrics that a usual business would concentrate on. And again, for the social startup, you can add the social metrics. How much unemployment your project will combat, will reduce. How much new places of interest will people have access to in their urban environment, and so on and so forth. But remember to keep track of the traditional metrics, such as profitability metrics that would apply to any enterprise. So do not forget that investor public will add certain premium to their perception of an enterprise because you're doing social good, right? But do not forget about the traditional metrics that you would always need to have in place. Sergey, would you remind me of the first question that
could you give a brief intro on how to value the social enterprise?
Again, the valuation techniques that you usually encounter in the financial industry apply to the social enterprises. So of course we can use discounted cash flows, we can use comparable companies or previous transactions in certain social enterprises from the past. However, there is always this social component that you can play with and utilize and improve your valuation on. So of course, if you can prove to the investor public that you can generate certain social benefit or social return on the investment, then you can increase the value of your company. The techniques to demonstrate it differ, and the industry has right now not converged to certain standards of how to incorporate those techniques into the valuation process. So we have say social return on investment, or we have certain tedious complicated econometric techniques to prove that certain activities, certain business endeavor generates certain social outputs and certain social outcomes. And that by itself can be a component evaluation of a firm, how much value added the firm generates. This is not convergent right now. So we are not convergent to a certain standard of showing and proving that valuation has increased by a certain percentage because you have proven your social impact. But I think we are moving in a good direction, and I hope that in the next decade we will converge to certain standards of how we actually incorporate the social value into the normal value of a business. So again, techniques used, discounted cash flow, previous transactions, comparable companies, all the usual techniques that we use for traditional businesses, plus the value of a social component that you are generating.
Mhm. Okay, thank you, Tim. Any other questions from participants? You just can turn on your microphones and ask it with your voices if you want, or you can write it in chat. Okay. Yeah, then I also want to ask you a question. I've heard a lot of definitions of social impact. Can you provide your own definition or your own understanding? What is it, and especially the boundaries of social impact? Where do you put where social enterprise should end the measurement of their social impact?
Sergey, to address your, I mean, your question is just, to the core of it, because think about the following. I mean, we, in economics, the discussions say about the returns to education, meaning, okay, what kind of benefit do you generate by just attending school for one additional year, right? So, and this can be measured by, say, by your salary increase. So if you attend one more year of schooling, how much more income will you generate over your lifetime? So investing in infrastructure, in educational activities, and the value that you will generate to yourself by attending school for one more additional year, that has been a research question since 1960s. So, the limits and the boundaries of social impact is a very, very tedious subject to investigate, right? So should we invest in more schooling? Are we certain that by producing more education in society will for sure increase people's income and maybe reduce income inequality? That's an open question. I would say, the profession of economics and the research in economics is addressing it constantly. And, every decade we have certain advances in exactly measuring the impact of say, an additional step in education for a person's value or for a personal, personal income. So it's a tedious question, and the limits are maybe in perceiving the golden cut, maybe the golden, where do we really stop, and how do we generate enough of education level in society to be able to say that we are somewhere in a Pareto optimal, economically speaking, in an outcome where we are basically cannot do more to improve the welfare of all the members of society. And I guess this is a very complex subject. I mean, this is an open question. It's a very good question, but if we would have answered it, I guess we would have been convergent to certain, to certain standards of measuring impact, of knowing how much impact we need, and where do we stop optimally.
Okay. So yeah, Alina wrote, thank you for detailed answer. Any other questions? Yeah, I want to ask one more question. What's your professional opinion about IRIS, library of input metrics? How do you evaluate it? Do you use it? Do you like it? What restrictions do you see in it? And
I would say that my involvement again with respect to the subject of impact measurement has been since maybe 2015-16, and I remember how it all started with GENE framework, where people try to formulate and reformulate certain approaches to the impact measurement, and it was very evident that we actually lack scientific rigor in measuring social impact, in basically converging to certain standards of understanding regarding, okay, whether or not you have really generated, whether or not you really caused certain positive social impact to occur in society. I would say that, of course, the more knowledge we have, the better. But the challenge is that we are, sometimes we are just diverging in different directions. We have maybe different definitions, we have different techniques, and at a certain point I realized that the social impact libraries or all the knowledge generated needs to really be streamlined under certain umbrella where certain institutions take very active, very active stance on knowledge accumulation and knowledge direction on the way that we measure things scientifically and we prove them. So there is a question of whether or not we can prove causality. So whether or not A causes B in terms of social impact, whether our entrepreneurial activity causes certain social outcomes, finally. So any kind of initiative that conveys this message, simplifies it, and educates on that topic is very much favored by me. So I'm in favor of scientific approach to things, even if they consider even if they are referred to social sciences. We are not in the exact sciences. We are not in mathematics, in physics. We're in social sciences. It's very hard for us to actually prove things scientifically, because the social laboratory is obviously different from the laboratory in the typical experiment in physics and chemistry. So it's very, very tedious, and we need to be really attentive and really rigorous. So if this initiative increases rigor and our rigorous understanding of certain social phenomena, including social impact, I'm absolutely in favor of it, and I would favor that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Tanya Turbo wrote, this was great, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Any more? Okay. Well, I think, yeah, it was really very interesting. Thank you, team, so much for wonderful this new information. And we will wait for your 3 days webinar in September. So everyone, please register for it. It will be absolutely amazing event. Yeah, I strongly recommend. For everyone, well, thank you all for your participation, for your time. It was really very interesting. We will send the presentation and all records for you, well, I guess tomorrow morning. And well, yeah, see you next events. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, team. Great session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Sergey.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.